Well, hello there, and welcome to another edition of Warbird Wednesday. My name is Fred Bell. I am the vice chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum, and today we are starting another adventure. This time as we are going down the road of reconnaissance aircraft. So we're going to go all the way back to the beginning and actually talk to an airplane that was designed in 1910 time frame and was owned by a number of the Allies. But first, my alembricated assistant, really? Yeah, he's like, I know why you did this. I told you I know why you did this. We're gonna take this off. Oh, that was humiliating. Oh, are you gonna go get it? Yeah, that's a grounder. You gotta go get it. All right, there we go. Greg pulls one out of the dirt. We are going to start with the Etrich, the Tauba. Now, I probably butchered that, and if I did butcher that, I sincerely apologize. This was and Greg can throw up a plan view on that. This I do not believe is that type of aircraft. It's close in that it's a monoplane, but I think this is close to an Endecker, but I could be wrong. I'm not really good on World War I airplanes, but the Tauba was built around 1910. The interesting thing about that aircraft was, well, first of all, it was one of the first kind of practical airplanes. It was owned by a bunch of different national air forces. So the RAF had one, the Germans had them, the French had them. They were a mass-produced aircraft from Germany, but at that time, the technology was so new that if you wanted an airplane, you had to kind of go get one where they were being built. Its really claim to fame is that Giulio Giovanti, an Italian aviator, dropped the first aerial bomb from one in 1911. I am going to get to the reconnaissance portion here as we move along. Now, the Tauba means dove, and if you look at the wing design, and Greg can throw up the wing design on this one, it looks like a dove, but that is misleading, Greg. It was actually, and this is the tie back to the flower, you fiendish man, you. It was actually designed from the seeds of Alsomatria macrocarpia. Close, hopefully. I probably butchered the heck out of that. And the thing was, back in those days, they didn't understand aerodynamics. And so what they were trying to come up with was anything that would like float on the air or birds or whatever, they were taking those designs because they knew they worked as an airfoil. So what we would now call an airfoil. So the seed from this plant would glide along the air, and that was and Greg can throw up the graphic on this with why it kind of looks like the wings of a dove on the outer edge, but that's not what that was. It was actually, that's a Fred fun fact, by the way. It was actually designed from the seed of a plant, of all things. Now, it was used primarily in observation at the start of the war. It was incredibly hard to see, and that was the issue. The wings were almost translucent, and from the ground, it was extremely difficult to see. The downside is that it proved extremely vulnerable to other aircraft. It wasn't very maneuverable. It was really one of the first airplanes, but it was very vulnerable to other airplanes. So very quickly, the aircraft moved out of service and went away in the Air Forces. It was primarily used for a trainer and this reconnaissance. Now, here is where we get a little interesting, because I am going to bring up a guy's name that probably hasn't been said in a long time. That was Friedrich Wilhelm Fred Zinn. Now, you would think that Zinn was in Germany. In the reality, he was in America. He was of German descent. Now, the interesting about him is he was one of the first guys that went and joined the French Foreign Legion, and he also signed the American Volunteer Corps flag in Europe in 1914. So he got involved in the conflict in Europe very early. He was one of the first folks. Now, his job was photo reconnaissance. So, and he did it in a Tauba. And so he would fly over the positions. He is credited as one of the first aviators to ever do photo reconnaissance. He dropped bombs, he did some other stuff, but he was really out trying to scope out these enemy positions. It was extremely dangerous work in the French Foreign Legion, in that we know that some of those units had 100% fatality rate. So they were literally wiped out. And that leads me to my salute today, Greg. I'm going to reach over here, and Harmony Springs. Didn't spend a lot for the label here, Greg. It's like made out of like cardboard. But it does have nutrition facts. Let's see, 110 calories, so not quite as bad as all the other ones. And let's see, Harmony Springs. It was in Maryland. It has a California Redemption. It actually even has a Facebook thing on it. So this is fairly new. You stepped up, actually, after feeding me gruel for the last 3. But what I want to do is salute all of the early folks we take for granted now, like photo reconnaissance and things like that, for granted, right? It's easy, or satellites do it or whatever, but somebody had to be first. And those people, it was very dangerous. Many of them died. And so what I want to do is salute all the folks that are involved in reconnaissance. If you are in reconnaissance, or a family member was involved in aero reconnaissance, going way back, you played a pivotal role in any of these wars, or in the Cold War. Reconnaissance was vital. Think about, Bay of Pigs, right? Or the Cuban Missile Crisis, or stuff like that, where those guys went in and flew very low level and were getting shot at. I'm going to talk about how dangerous reconnaissance was in general for American forces here in a second. But if you were in a reconnaissance unit, I salute you. This one did not fizz, by the way. There's a little carbonation like coming up there when I turn the bottle, but that's disgusting. I mean, it's just, the finish is terrible. But, I promised you a second sip, so we'll go ahead and give you a second sip. That's almost as much torture as being shot at in photo reconnaissance. So, now, the interesting thing about good old Fred, by the way, Fred, Zinn, get it, was that after the war, he got into something that was really interesting, and that was, and we have a concept now that is no man left behind. He pioneered that concept. And his thing was, he actually went and looked for downed aviators. He made a career out of it. So if you were a missing aviator during the war, he would try to find you and take you home to your family, make sure that you were properly buried wherever your family was. He was so good at it that in World War II, he also did in World War II, that countries adopted his tactics in order to search for lost airmen. So, and he's a guy, really, if you think about it, that kind of disappeared into history. Now, when we talk about disappeared, this is another thing I want to mention about reconnaissance, and especially American reconnaissance during the Cold War. If you were involved in a heavy reconnaissance during the Cold War, pretty much you were disavowed by the Americans. And there is a really good RAND report, which you'll have to go out and find. It was about 1999, that details American losses during the Cold War. They were in the hundreds of American airmen that were shot down over the Soviet Union or over Soviet assets. If you were an American airman at that time, and you were shot down, it was better that you got killed. And I know that sounds terrible, but at least your death was quick, because there's no question that the Russians, when they captured American airmen in the Cold War, they fed them back into the Soviet intelligence system. They would put them in the gulags, and they would wring every bit of intelligence out of them, because the idea was they were trying to find out what was going on in the United States so they could give that to their spies so they could fit in better. The only outcome of that, if you were captured because you were disavowed, was that you either got shot or you went into the gulag system, and they never saw you again. So to all of those American airmen that took on an extremely dangerous mission that we're going to cover, but we're going to cover all reconnaissance over the next 5 or 6 weeks, it's an extremely dangerous job, and you deserve a lot of credit. Now, good old Fred Zinn doesn't get mentioned much. In fact, you could really argue that his name is lost to history, but I would encourage you to go look him up, because he really started the whole concept of leave no man behind. Now, if you want to amaze your friends and have a wonderful time and a display piece, we have this great puzzle of all of these World War I aircraft. And I would encourage you to go ahead and inspire Jason. Click on the tab, and Jason will leap down to the mailbox and mail you one of these from our gift shop. This is really cool. I like doing these things. And in this case, there's a lot of airplanes on there that you wouldn't normally know, so you can actually learn something as well. This is all World War I. So click on that link. We cannot do all of this restoration work and fly these airplanes without your generous donation. So if you can give us click on the link and give us a donation, we would appreciate that as well. We live for those, so we really appreciate that. If you came across us on YouTube and you like nothing but deep dives, and we're swimming against the YouTube algorithm for these little short pieces, and you want a 14, 15 minute piece on aircraft, military aircraft, go ahead and give us a subscription. We could really use those subscriptions. They help the channel. Forward it to people that like this kind of stuff. We appreciate that as well. If you came across us on Facebook, we appreciate your comments. Give us a like. And my name is Fred Bell. I am the Vice Chairman of the Palm Springs Air Museum. Thanks so much. Have a great day.